You're about to hear from the serial messenger. What I'm about to share right now is for every human being. It is not a religious piece. It is for promotion of human well-being. So whether or not you believe in God, you may want to pay attention because something might be helpful to you. In the last episode, we concluded that how we can grow beyond hurt, fear, shame, and all nature of suffering is to have knowledge, and this knowledge is knowledge of God. In the next episode, we shall clarify this conclusion by highlighting some events where hurt, fear, shame, and various forms of suffering were experienced by humans and how knowledge of God was applied or would have been applied to bring relief. I did suggest that to really understand what we're about to explore in this episode, it is better we do not use only religious perspective to define God. So in this episode, we shall understand what it means to have the knowledge of God, so that we can see that having the knowledge of God is for everyone who wants a life free of suffering, not just for people with religious affiliations. If the message has been helpful so far, do help others find it by liking and then subscribing to my channel. Your comments can add value to me and others. I'll be notified about my new posts when you click on the notification icon below. For the sake of this podcast, shame, fear, and all similar experiences are forms of suffering if they cause emotional discomfort that one is unable to get rid of without consequences by simply distancing oneself. Any form of suffering is destructive when continuous exposure to it does not bring goodness to the one exposed. We shall interchangeably use the knowledge of God, the knowledge of good, and the knowledge of goodness, since God is the perfect goodness and the source of everything good. Lastly, one's knowledge of God shall mean one's intellectual understanding and experiential awareness of God's nature, God's character, God's personality, His identity, His approach to life events, His ultimate purpose for humanity, His purpose for the individual in each and every occasion, and His capabilities. Here's what I meant when I just said that we don't limit the need for the knowledge of God to persons with religious affiliations. A few seconds ago, while clarifying what a person's knowledge of God should mean, we mentioned God's character, God's personality, God's nature, and God's identity. All four terms are related concepts but have distinct meanings, as we shall now see. To summarize them, God's character refers to God's moral attributes. God's personality refers to God's relational qualities. God's nature refers to God's fundamental essence. And God's identity refers to how God is recognized and revealed. A little more details on this may prove helpful. Let's start with God's character. It refers to God's moral and ethical attributes, qualities such as His goodness, justice, love, mercy, holiness, righteousness, and faithfulness. It describes who God is in terms of His moral essence and His actions. For example, God is love, as stated in 1 John 4 verse 8, speaks to God's character. God's personality. God's personality refers to the traits that make God relatable and capable of relationships, such as being loving, communicative, patient, and wise. It emphasizes God's personhood, a distinction from Him being perceived as an abstract force. And it highlights His ability to connect with His creation, such as the ability to love, communicate, feel, and interact with creation. Did I just say that God's personality highlights His ability to connect with His creation? Well, that's fact. And if you believe that God is the architect of all creation, and you believe He created you, then God's personality highlights God's ability to connect with you. A third term is God's nature, and this term encompasses the essence of who God is. It refers to His eternal and infinite being, omnipotence, omnipresence, omniscience, immutability, and divinity. It addresses what makes God uniquely God. Last but not least, God's identity. It refers to God's overall essence and nature, including His name, attributes, role, and self-revelation. For example, In Christianity, God's identity includes being the Creator, the Trinity, the Redeemer. His names include Yahweh, Elohim, and he defines himself as I am that I am. Would you rather call it knowledge of good than knowledge of God? Well, so long as that knowledge is completely good in concept and in effect when acted upon, it's still knowledge of what God is known for, so ultimately it's still knowledge of God. It might be necessary to state that no knowledge of God is too small or too big when the person that has it is intentional about knowing God and knowing all about Him. Being intentional to know all about God keeps one seeking to know Him more, both in theory and by experience. Notwithstanding, it is necessary to remember that no human can fully know and experience God in all His entirety. To put it in perspective, God has been existing before time and is concurrently existing in now and in all future time into eternity. And since from experience we can see that humans haven't been able to know all that happened last year or all that will happen today or tomorrow. It is practically impossible for any human to know all that God was before time and all He currently is now and in all future time.
You've heard from the serial messenger. Till next time, go make your move.